Hey BookTube, I know it's been a while since I've made any kind of video. I'm out of the habit of making videos, so I thought what better way to get into the habit again than to show you some used books that I've recently purchased. I got a number of stacks on the side here, so I'll go through them. Most of them are nonfiction and some classics, so if that's not what you're interested in, then you don't need to watch this video if you don't feel like it, but there is some fiction here, but not very much. I'll go through the classics first. So, first volume is The Three Jacobian Tragedies by Penguin English Library. So it's a volume of three Jacobian tragedies, which would be the reign of King James I back in the latter part of the years of Shakespeare's time. It does not include Shakespeare. It includes the Revengers tragedy by Tournier. I don't know how to pronounce that guy's name. The White Devil by Weber, and The Changeling by Middleton. So three non-Shakespeare plays of this period between around, was it 1603 to what, 1620s, something like that. And it includes just three plays, and I picked this up because I've never heard them before, and if they're influential or interesting, it's really, really cool to compare plays from Shakespeare's time to Shakespeare. I have not actually read any other Shakespeare plays, or any non-Shakespeare plays from this period, uh, except for one play from Christopher Marlowe. So having a different selection of plays would be really interesting. This I did find out only after I purchased this volume that this one, the spine is cracked and falling apart. That doesn't bother me too much. I only spent a couple of dollars on this, like $2, and to get, and if this does come apart, I could treat it like two volumes. So I'm not that big of a deal, and I'm sure that I'll get more than $2 worth of enjoyment out of this. So there's that one. Next is a recommend from a big personality on BookTube. And if you know, then you know who this is, who would recommend this kind of thing. This is the first Rumple Omnibus, so by John Mortimer. And this is the first two short story collections and the first novel of Rumple of the Bailey, which is uh, basically the story of Horace Rumple, who's a judge, I believe, for the old criminal court of Britain, the Old Bailey, and these are light, funny stories, from what I understand, of his different cases written from his own hand, and he's got a lot of. It's very personality driven, and you get to see him reflecting on his career from his own perspective. I have not actually read any of them before, but this came strongly recommended by Steve Donahue. So if you have not watched Steve, I recommend that you do. And coming across this very first volume, I thought was really cool. Was a good, because I had no idea where to start with him. With these Rumple books, it's kind of like I have the same struggle with Woodhouse too. I'd like to try some of Woodhouse, P.G. Woodhouse, but I don't know where to start, and so I have not made any attempt on where to start or where to read. With Sherlock Holmes, it's a lot different for me because there's a pretty clear lineage between when stories were published, so that was a lot easier to do. So I've been reading a lot of Sherlock Holmes lately. Next is a collection of plays, a Penguin classic, of Aristophanes. This is The Wasps, The Poet and the Women, and Frogs. The Frogs. So we got three plays, translated by David Barrett. If you're familiar with classical literature, Aristophanes is a Greek comedy playwright. I do have the other selection that Penguin publishes right there on one of the stacks. They do two collections of the Plays of Aristophanes, and I found the one that I did not have, so that was great, great find. I do like picking up these relatively modern translations. I believe this translation was 1964. I still consider that pretty modern. It's not like Victorian period uh, dense prose. I mean, there's a charm in older translations too, but I like having these modern translations just because they're more accessible, I find, and they include notes that are intended for new audiences. And the next is also a Penguin classic, and it's also a classical writer of plays. This is Terence, the comedies. Terence is a Roman, or he was a Roman comedy playwright, and based on, I have not read any of his plays before, but he is, I believe he was not very popular in his own time, and I'm not entirely sure why, but somehow his plays caught on later on after his death, and he became very influential in the medieval and Renaissance period about how people constructed their comedies. Because Terence himself was also um, taking after actually the Greek comedies, not just Aristophanes. There was more, but Aristophanes is the only Greek comedy playwright that we have surviving. But Terence was taking a lot of their comedy models and how they wrote their plays and putting them into his own Latin forms, and then Terence influenced a lot of even Shakespeare comedies or influenced by Terence. So, which is interesting. Speaking of Shakespeare, but this is not a comedy. This is the Oxford World Classic, the Oxford Shakespeare of Richard III. And I really, really love these Oxford volumes of Shakespeare's plays. I do have a big fat collected Shakespeare, which has short introductions and a lot of really helpful footnotes at the bottom of the page. But I've found that for an individual one volume study of a Shakespeare play, these are one of the best. And I say that because they come with a massive introduction. Like this introduction here is over 130 pages, which is a short book in itself. And each volume comes with just a ton of, here, let me see if I can show you, a ton of notes at the very bottom. And you could ignore those if you want, but you don't have to. And also I like having the individual plays because the font is a lot bigger than, say, in a big fat collected volume. So you get a lot of notes at the bottom, and it's like that all over the place. What's charming about this particular edition is that there's someone that made annotations all along, and they couldn't bring themselves to write in the book, so they just put sticky notes. So I can take those out if they're annoying or intrusive, but I'm interested in seeing what they have to say. I do recommend these Shakespeare volumes. Or these Oxford Shakespeare volumes. I have a few already, and I also have some Norton critical editions, but I think they're both catering to different audiences, because the Norton does not have nearly as many notes as that, so it's not as an in-depth line-by-line study of the play, while the Norton gives a lot of extra material at the very end instead of a very long introduction. So that'll be a delightful volume. Speaking of Norton Criticals, I found the Norton Critical, the Classic Fairy Tales, and this is edited by Maria Tartar. I guess I should say who edited this volume. This is edited by John Jowett, and you know that they put a lot of time into editing those volumes. But this is edited by Maria Tatar, and I believe this edition was published in the 90s. But anyways, this is exactly what it says it is. It's collecting a lot of famous fairy tales, but because fairy tales are not usually one fixed tale. Like there's no one Cinderella tale or no one Little Red Riding Hood tale. There's a lot of variation from different authors. So that's what this volume does, is it takes a theme. I believe they have 4 different themes. Yeah, they have the Beauty and the Beast, and then they take, what was it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different iterations of that tale of Beauty and the Beast, and then they collect them here back to back. And they do that for Snow White, for Cinderella, Little Red Riding Hood, Bluebeard, Hansel and Gretel, and then they have a short section on the fairy tales of Hans Christian Andersen and Oscar Wilde. And then the delight of these these Norton Critical editions is that they include, as you see down here, and on this page, yeah, there's a highlight, but I didn't find any highlights in the rest of the volume. This is all critical material that is scholars writing about fairy tales in different ways. And I actually read the very first Little Red Riding Hood fairy tale that they include in here by it's called The Story of the Grandmother, and they don't attribute an author to it, but it's good that they don't, because that was a really eerie story. It's only like a page long, and it is not for kids at all, and it's, you know, it's very creepy and sinister, and not in a good way. Like, it makes you uncomfortable just reading it. And it's not a well written or well done story in any way. But I haven't read the variations, so I want to see how it progresses and how the story evolves through different cultures. And this volume allows you to do that. Next, we actually have our only piece of actual fiction, and that's The Mirror and the Light by Hilary Mantel. If you are familiar with this author, you'll know that this is the third book in her Cromwell historical novel series. This is, she published this in 2020, I believe, and she wrote 2 other novels before this that I own. I found them all used. I have not been buying these new, even though I've been very interested in reading her Cromwell series. But I've been waiting to find them all used, and finally I found the third one, which is interesting that I found them all in order. I found Wolf Hall used, and then I found Bring Up the Bodies used, and then I found this one used, and it's only been in that order, which is really strange. And I didn't actually intend to buy this one, because I actually have an e-copy of this on my e-reader. But I ended up buying it because when I was at the till paying for my books, the used bookstore that I was at has a policy or sale that's always ongoing, where if you buy, I think it's buy 4 books, you get the 5th one free. And I had 4 books, got the 5th one free, and then I had another 4 books on that item list. So I would get the next one free, so I quickly went back and picked this one up because I saw it there. It's one of those bigger volumes with the French flaps and the deckled edges. I'm not the biggest fan of these volumes, mostly because they're a bit ungainly at times, especially when they're so long. My other volumes are not in the same edition, so the set certainly won't be uniform. Actually, I have it right down here. I could show you my edition of Wolf Hall. As you see, certainly smaller, and it doesn't have the French flaps, and it's got the different design. So I kind of prefer this more because it's more compact. These ones are made to look stately and really to be attractive volumes. I would have been just fine with the ebook, but because I have this volume, this will be fine as well. So I'm not complaining, having the whole set in physical copy. Next, we'll go on to, I think I'll go on to 2 more classics. These are classics of philosophy. We got a Penguin Classic of David Hume's a treatise of human nature. And I really should not have bought this because it's easy to get this exact edition, or not the exact edition, not the Penguin Classic, but to get the copy of this text for free on Project Gutenberg on my e-reader. And I think that might be beneficial in his case, but when there's a Penguin Classic, I can't turn it up. And I was disappointed when I went through this volume after I had bought it, because usually with Penguin Classics you can rely on them having notes in the back and a good introduction. And this only has a very short introduction, probably like less than 15 pages, I believe. And there's no notes whatsoever. Like at the very end here, I believe. Yeah, right here. The book ends. And it's just exactly that. The book just ends. No footnotes along the edge here or anything, unless it's his own footnotes, David Hume's own footnotes. But I figured I'd pick it up anyways, just in case I wanted to read the physical version when the time came for me to pick this up and read it. Next is an interesting find. It's by Thomas Malthus, and it's an essay on the principle of population. This is an influential essay on his ideas of population, and I haven't read it myself, but from what I gather, he makes the connection between increasing populations and scarcity of food, and he makes a very controversial argument or decision, or whatever his ideas are that have ended up becoming infamous among thinkers and philosophers. Though this edition is edited by Antony Flew, and this one only has a little bit of notes, so it's better than the Hume version, because this is English. I can get this on Project Gutenberg as well. But the introduction here by Antony Flew is 50 pages, and he makes the claim that Thomas Malthus has been misunderstood too often, and that the arguments that have made his name infamous are not actually arguments that he would have agreed with. So that should be interesting to read, especially in the context of that. And what was surprising to me is that it sounds like he's actually going to be an interesting companion on the page, because what I like to do with my books when I buy them brand new or buy them used, they're new to me, is like I'd like to read the very first page or so, just to get a little taste about what it's about. And the opening line here is actually pretty epic. Let's see if I can read it out to you in clear. Read it out clearly. The great and unlooked for discoveries that have taken place of late years in natural philosophy, the increasing diffusion of general knowledge from the extension of the art of painting, the ardent and unshackled spirit of inquiry that prevails throughout the lettered and even unlettered world, the new and extraordinary lights that have been thrown on political subjects, which dazzle and astonish the understanding, and particularly the tremendous phenomenon in the political horizon, the French Revolution, which, like a blazing comet, seems destined either to inspire with fresh life and vigor, or to scorch up and destroy the shrinking inhabitants of the earth, have all concurred to lead many able men into the opinion that we are touching on a period big with the most important changes that would in some measure be decisive for the future face of mankind. How's that to start an essay? And that mention of the French Revolution, this was published in 1798, which was right when the French Revolution was raging, and so you can understand his concern there and why he would hold that perspective based on that period of history. Now I have two more books, which are a bit miscellaneous, and kind of weird in a way, and this was probably the funniest find that I've ever found at a used bookstore, and it's called The Critical Meme Reader, and the subtitle is Global Mutations of the Viral Image, and that's exactly what it sounds like. It's a bunch of academics from the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences, bunch of academics actually writing critical, dense essays about memes. Okay, so my phone cut out on me. Sorry about that. I was talking about the critical meme reader and how it was written by scholars with the subtitle Global Mutations of the Viral Image. And it's a collection of essays on memes by scholars from the Amsterdam University of Applied Science. And they actually include a ton of images, and they don't even talk about just Western memes, but Eastern memes as well. So then you got like that, images there, and they also have some full colored ones too, if I can get to them. Right here, so I got that. Some artist depictions, see? But the funniest thing about this is not that it's about a bunch of scholarly essays on memes, but it's about how seriously they take themselves. So this is serious academic work here. I would read the back, but I found it amusing anyways to get a critical meme reader. And this next book actually relates to my own schooling. Currently, I'm in university to become a high school English teacher, and so of course I'm always on the eye for good books on education. And I found one today called The Skilled Teacher, or The Skillful Teacher, by Stephen D. Brookfield, on technique, trust, and responsiveness in the classroom. And this is exactly the kind of book that I'm looking for, because he is, I believe, yeah, he's a veteran teacher, and this is the second edition. He said he wrote the first edition when he was after 20 years of teaching, and then after 35 years of teaching, so 15 years later, he revised it for a second edition. And what sold me on buying this was looking at the table of contents, where he talks about like understanding classrooms, what students value in teachers, understanding and responding to emotions of learning, which is interesting. Emotions in learning is not usually something that you consider in a school subject or school area. And lecturing creatively, preparing discussion, teaching in diverse classrooms, responding to resistance, dealing with the politics of teaching, and surviving emotionally. And then there's more there, but it's those headings that really interested me and what sold me on getting this, because I've never heard of this author before, and I'm sure there's a ton of useless books on teaching out there, so I hope this is not one of them. And I have now moving on to more history. Well, more history books. Now I have this book, a collection of essays on the Holy Grail. This is edited by John Matthews and is called At the Table of the Grail, Magic and the Use of Imagination. So if you're not aware, which you probably aren't, because I haven't made videos for almost a year, I'm very big into medieval history. That's my favorite subject. I'm still very new in medieval history, so I don't know everything, or know even some general aspects of medieval history, but one aspect that I'm most interested in is medieval literature, which includes chivalric tales, which includes the most famous, which is King Arthur literature, and that's where the Holy Grail comes in, because part of King Arthur's the archetypal storyline of King Arthur you come up with the Holy Grail, and there's many different editions and renditions of the Holy Grail and what it means. And this is a collection of essays, which I thought were by scholars, but it doesn't seem like that from the more I look into this. It's, yeah, a collection of 12 essays. They just call them leading authorities, but from what I've looked, they're not really scholarly. It's taking the whole idea of the Holy Grail and making it spiritual. Like, listen to this blurb here. The story of the Grail, one of the best known in the British mystery tradition, is not just a charming medieval legend, but an inexhaustible well of inspiration for people setting out on their own inner journey. So, I mean, I only read that after I bought this because I thought it was a bunch of essays looking at uh, the idea of the Grail legend from different perspectives, but what it sounds like is taking the Holy Grail as a concept and putting that into self-help terms. So I don't know how interesting this will be. I don't really regret buying it because it wasn't really expensive, but hopefully it'll be interesting. Next is another book on the medieval ages. This is called The Waning of the Waning of the Middle Ages by J. Huizinga. And this is usually one of the main books that comes up when you look up like a general list of medieval history. And this one is a popular one, and it's been reprinted a lot. And what surprised me when when I actually started flipping through this, is that this book was originally published in 1924. This edition is from the 70s, but 1924, so this year, this book will have turned 100 years old, which you can imagine in 100 years, the waning of the Middle Ages will have improved in scholarship. But in, I guess, their time period compared to ours, where we don't have such swing between the good and the evil of life as much as, say, the medieval people did when, they lacked health care, they lacked a lot of the, I guess, benefits of the modern age. So, just things we take for granted all the time, like average, like plumbing, food on the table, markets and stuff like that. That's just how I understood his opening there. And while that was well written, I don't know how true that will be, so I'm going to take this with a grain of salt, but hopefully the rest of the book is as entertaining as that. I got a few more books here. This one is a book actually on World War II history, and I'm not usually well into World War II or any of the world wars, and I think that's because maybe they're too recent for me, looking at me like I'm the 60s, a veteran of the World War. No, I'm kidding. But I'm just not. I don't find it compelling history, and maybe it's because it's the kind of history that I was taught a lot in school, and maybe that puts me off a bit. But I did pick up a World War II history here, and this is Hitler's Willing Executioners, and the subtitle is Ordinary Germans and the Holocaust, and it's by Daniel Jonah Goldhagen. And what compelled me to this was not the sticker that says that it was a finalist for some book award. It was the subtitle, which is Ordinary Germans. It talks about ordinary Germans. And what he argues, from what I can get from the back cover copy, is that your understanding of Germans during Hitler's reign and the rampant anti-Semitism of the times were not the result of just people just going with the crowd and being part of their political times, even though that was a part of it. He says that there is a lot more personal and moral action going on, that people were actually invested in this personally, and that they themselves, when they weren't compelled, still took it on themselves to actually inflict harm upon Jewish people, which is a very interesting subject, because you'll hear that a lot about people. How can you sweep a whole nation and just call them all monsters, right? So what he does is he delves into the history and the psychology of these ordinary Germans, and whether or not, what was their reaction to the Holocaust, how did they treat Jewish people. And it's a relatively thick book, and it's exactly the kind of topic that really interests me. So I picked that one up. Here's another one. This is The Culture of Western Europe by George L. Moss. The subtitle is The 19th and 20th Centuries. This is basically a textbook. on exactly what the title says, the culture of Western Europe. And I love these kind of unconventional looks at history, where you have the culture of. So it's not just a history of Western Europe; it's the culture. And I did read a little bit of the introduction about that, because the introduction is literally just called Statements and Definitions, where he defines what he means by culture and what exactly a history of culture looks like. But yeah, he goes through like romanticism, nationalism, liberty and liberalism, conservatism, Marxism, and he traces it during the 19th and 20th centuries. And that's exactly something like that I am very interested in, other than just the same old political and war histories that a lot of um, histories delve into. I mean, they're interesting in their own way, but for me, cultural histories are I find more entertaining and more engaging. And this next book, the second last book on my stack here, is probably the find of the day for me, and I'll explain why. This is Aboriginal History, a Reader, edited by Kristen Burnett and Jeff Reed, published by Oxford University Press. I love buying textbooks like this. I've got a number of them for like Roman history, uh, like political philosophy, and uh, you know, general like philosophical history and whatnot. Just all these different kinds of. I think I even have one for Western civilization. Yeah, no, 20th century. Never mind. But yeah, I really love these Oxford history books, and what makes this one so unique is that it's about Aboriginal history. If you don't know, I'm Canadian, so like Indigenous history itself is a very fraught subject, and usually it's hard to find a lot of uh, unbiased accounts of Indigenous history. And so, but I'm very interested in learning more about Indigenous history. And because actually, I did say I was going to be an English teacher, but I also want to teach history as well. And teaching history these days includes a lot of Indigenous history. So getting this book will be hopefully will be a good introduction to the subject, and a, a good just a good sweeping history. I mean, I guess I can't call it sweeping if it's a reader, because it's a lot of selections from items, but and essays that were written specifically for this volume. But uh, I'm looking for a sweeping history. I guess, and this will be a good stand-in before I can find one of those. And the last book is a book that I'm not sure if I regret or not, but either way, it is something that I'm interested in. But I think I have maybe too many of these kinds of books already. And this is Western Civilizations by three authors: Edward McNeill Burns, Robert E. Lerner, and Standish Mackham. And it's a big, fat history of Western civilizations. This is the ninth edition, and the ninth edition, I believe this is published in 1980. I looked that up before, but I can't remember. Let's just go with that, 1980. I'm pretty sure anyways, it's somewhere in the 80s. And I love these big fat histories of Western civilization. But what makes this one unique from what I've found when looking through it is that this one goes from the very beginning. So like the very beginning of like human civilization to begin with, and then tracks the Western thread all the way throughout history. I have a number of modern Western civilization histories where they basically start after the Middle Ages, just after the Middle Ages, and then they continue on to the modern day. I think, I counted 3 of those before, and then I only have one big fat volume where it's a sweeping history from the very beginning to now, but that is a world history. It's the Penguin Book of World History, or a Penguin History of the World, something like that. But what makes this one also unique is that because it's so fat, and because it's a textbook, It includes just a ton of imagery on every page. So you got a lot of black and white images that you see there. But then there's also, let's see if I can find any. Nope. Let's see. There's a lot of colored images in here as well. And maps. Maps and full page. Yeah. That's really heavy, so I shouldn't be holding it like that. But yeah, there's, take my word for it, there's a lot of colored stuff in here as well. Colored images. Yeah, and why I say I don't know if I regret it, but I have a lot of books that kind of cover this kind of history. But it's a big fat one-volume history of Western civilizations, and it was really hard to turn down, especially since it was so cheap, comparatively speaking. Even if it is considerably older, like it only goes up to like the mid 70s or late 70s whenever this was ended up being printed. But yeah, that was good. I hope you enjoyed watching it. I don't know how articulate I was, considering it's been a while since I've done this, but you know, thanks a lot, and I'll hopefully make some more videos. See ya.